Hey everybody, welcome back to Cinematically, the series dedicated to talking about movies that I may have missed for whatever reason or have seen but just haven't gotten a chance to talk about. Today we are talking about 2015's The Last Witch Hunter starring Vin Diesel. To be honest, this was a very little movie that not a lot of people talked about from what I remember. I remember seeing it right around 2016, maybe 2017, but I just recently rewatched it just because I was like, I think I like that movie, but let me just rewatch it just to double check. And lo and behold, I actually did somewhat like the movie, maybe not as much as I liked it then, but I still somewhat had a good time with watching The Last Witch Hunter. And before we get started, this movie also stars Elijah Wood, Michael Caine, and is directed by Breck Eisner, who actually also directed another movie that I like a lot that not a lot of people do, and that is Matthew McConaughey's Sahara. And just like that movie, this one was not very well received. Currently on Rotten Tomatoes, it has an audience score of about 30 something, and it has an overall rating of about 18%. Pretty rough if you ask me. So The Last Witch Hunter is about Vin Diesel's character who's tried to kill the witch way back when, but then got cursed to essentially live forever, and he fights witches all throughout his life. Now we're set in modern day New York City, where the witch is more or less coming back, or he has to fight her again, type of thing. This movie, I think, was kind of set up to be a longer running thing, but it ended up kind of falling flat. It's not really based on anything that I could find, but I did actually really enjoy this movie for the most part. It does have some parts where I felt like maybe it wasn't quite the movie that a lot of people would like, and I kind of understand those lower ratings. But again, just like last week's King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, and the previous week's Robin Hood, this movie actually isn't as bad as a lot of people think it is. And with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the point number one. Let's start off with the thing that I think is probably the most underrated, and that is just the overall lore of this movie. I really enjoyed it. I thought that the whole witch aspect, this guy being cursed to live forever, was probably one of the coolest things. He has sort of what's called a Dolan, which is kind of like a sidekick or confidant, more or less, that he can kind of confide in and help him with various things. And they switch out every so often. Michael Caine is the most recent one, and then it's being changed over to Elijah Wood's character. And I felt like that whole aspect was kind of cool, that they kind of had that confidant and like this for this badass warrior. And then he sort of has to fight all these witches. He doesn't have to fight them constantly, but he either like imprisons them, or he has to work with various types of like mages of some kind who have different elements that they maybe work with, more fire, more sort of plant-based stuff, certain elixirs, things like that. I thought that was actually really cool, and I thought that was very underutilized and underappreciated in this movie. I felt like that was the one thing, maybe the biggest draw overall that this movie had over of anything. It just felt like it was just a cool concept. But I think that's maybe where it kind of ended, and some of the things that just Vin Diesel being Vin Diesel kind of got in the way. And that leads me into point number two, which is the acting. It's not bad. It's not, there's been a lot worse, but it's clearly like the Vin Diesel showboating to his type, which is like the badass can do it all. He's going to survive whatever you throw at him. And he literally can because he's immortal, which is very much like his other movie, Bloodshot, which was also part of Cinematically. It's Cinematically Lateception in here. Leave those up in the corner. But this one was way better than Bloodshot. Bloodshot, I think, was good, but this one was, in a way, a little bit more grounded in terms of like the magic elements, even though it was very fantastic. Bloodshot's very fantastic, but it stuck with a little bit more grit and realism, a lot more in-camera stuff, and didn't rely too heavily on CGI. Although it is there, it's more for effect of showing like magic and really cool stuff. In Bloodshot, it's just like he got shot in the face and then the nanites kind of put it back. This one, he's just like constantly taking those hits, and it just feels a lot more real because he actually maybe did those stunts versus Bloodshot, where they were just like, he's maybe getting a little bit older. Let's swap it out for some CGI stuff. To be honest, I kind of feel like this movie was, if anybody knows like the meme of like, this person walked so that this one could run type of thing. That's a big thing, like I think like on Instagram and TikTok and things like that. But I think this movie walked so that Bloodshot could run, because they are essentially the same movie, but this one is way better just because it has a lot more dynamics to it. He has a history with a daughter and his wife that he lost. There's elements to it that are just so badass that Bloodshot completely disregarded and just focused solely on let's just make him an unstoppable guy and just kind of shoot some stuff at him. This one, he's actually forced to be in it because he has to use those sword techniques, because he has to be in actual fights. He has to deal with magic more hand to hand, face to face. Whereas in Bloodshot, it's just like, oh, let's just shoot him from a ways and just kind of try and kill him, but even though he can't. He just ends up being a Terminator at that point. Whereas this one, he's a Terminator, but there's some more elements to it that make it a lot more, that feel at least a little bit more like he's in danger at times, and especially towards the end because he of some things that occur. It kind of flips the script, whereas Bloodshot, that just never was there. In terms of the other actors, I thought they did a pretty good job. There is a fun little twist, or I shouldn't call it fun, but there is a little bit of a twist towards the end that I thought was actually kind of cool. I thought Michael Caine, just him being involved, was kind of cool. Elijah Wood's character was kind of a pain, but at the same time, he was kind of just trying to do his job because he was new to it. So, I mean, that kind of made sense. And then there's also a character who I forgot her name, but she's also in Game of Thrones and is like Jon Snow's girlfriend in like the Viking people, whatever you want to call them. If you've ever seen Game of Thrones, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. She's a redhead. He actually married that girl in real life, I think. But anyway, she's also in this. She actually did a really good job. I really enjoyed her character. She did kind of come off a little bit Emma Stone sometimes, which I think was maybe a little bit of an issue. But for the most part, she did a really good job. Now, for point number 3, I think that the other comparison that I have to make for this movie has to come to Constantine, starring Keanu Reeves. Now, this movie, I think, is the perfect blend of Constantine and Bloodshot. Like I just mentioned, how this movie walks so the Bloodshot could run, this movie is kind of copying, in some ways, Constantine. So if you're a fan of Constantine starring Keanu Reeves, I recommend checking out The Last Witch Hunter. It has some really cool stuff and elements to it that very reminiscent of that in terms of like the dark magic, the way magic is used, different elements that he has to use in combination in order to get to sort of like the big boss, I guess, if you want to call it that way. And these sort of side characters that he has to go and talk to, meet in this magical sort of underground world. There are a lot of parallels to other movies in this. So why it wasn't successful, I'm not sure. Maybe because they were comparing, them a little too closely to Constantine. Obviously, Bloodshot wasn't a thing back then. Because it felt a little similar to some aspects, it just wasn't well received. Maybe people didn't like the whole lore aspect. To me, it was a lot of fun, so I definitely highly recommend checking it out. So guys, those are really all my thoughts on 2015's The Last Witch Hunter. Is it perfect? No. Does it have its moments where it's just sort of like, not so great? Sure. But again, if you like Constantine, if you like Bloodshot, if you like any of those movies, I recommend checking it out. It's worth a watch. You're definitely going to have a good time with it regardless. But if you have seen it, make sure you let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section down below. Also, while you're down there, make sure you leave a thumbs up as well as hit that subscribe button, as I do have a new Cinematically Late every single Thursday, as well as have a upcoming giveaway, which I'll leave also up here for when I hit to 300 subscribers, which I need your help to get there by sharing these videos. So make sure you guys check those videos out. Other than that, that's all I really have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.